Tim Kaine, people may not realize that Tim Kaine is shockingly decent on Israel, like for the Senate standards and for what you might expect of the guy that was selected to be Hillary Clinton's vice president. I mean, he did not attend Netanyahu's speech where Netanyahu worked with Republicans to circumvent Obama back in the day and spoke directly to Congress. And there were some members of Congress that did not attend in protest. Tim Kaine was one of those folks in the Senate. And, he is on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's in Virginia he's the senator from Virginia. So he's quite close to like the defense industry, our Defense Department, Washington, D.C., the blob, right? Like Maryland and Virginia, those are the states in the D.C. metro area where there's a lot of like that industry infrastructure. And so that is the context of this, like of his politics, honestly. And I think that's what makes his stance here pretty admirable, and the fact that he chose to call out the Biden administration like this important as we begin to ramp up the pressure on the Biden administration to end support for Israel right now. Because the United States has been shooting at the Houthis, has been shooting at Houthi targets and in Yemen as well, in response to the fact that Houthis and other groups are blocking ships, commercial ships, and sometimes attacking them in the Red Sea, trying to disrupt trade in order to show support for Palestinians and put pressure on the West to end their support of this genocide. I think it's quite straightforward. They've said that that's their intention, and they did drastically reduce their attacks during the temporary ceasefire, and they had said that they will do that if there is a ceasefire. So, like, maybe we could try that instead of bombing them all the time. And that was kind of the logic that Tim Kaine arrived at as well.
Chairman.
Senator Kaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. The Houthi behavior is abhorrent, but I've got to admit, I have grave skepticism about what we are doing right now. I have grave skepticism about the legal authorities. I have grave skepticism about the absence of true shared responsibility with nations whose ships are being attacked by the Houthis. Why should the U.S. and the U.K. be shouldering the burden of protecting other nations' ships? And I have serious skepticism about the effectiveness of this operation in terms of de-escalating either the attacks in the Red Sea. To begin with, on legal authority, I think we've all conceded that there is no congressional authorization for these hostilities. The hostilities definition under the War Powers Resolution has clearly been met when we're talking about 200 attacks on Houthis. We're losing troops, they're losing civilian casualties and others. This is hostilities. There's no congressional authorization for them. To claim that this is covered by Article 2 self-defense, Article 2 self-defense means you can defend U.S. personnel, you can defend U.S. military assets, you probably can defend U.S. commercial ships. But the defense of other nations' commercial ships in no way, and it's not even close, that's not self-defense under Article 2 of the Constitution. And a president can't make it self-defense by calling another nation a partner. If you're defending the commercial ships of other nations, it is, in my view, laughable to call that self-defense. And so a narrow mission to defend U.S. shipping, both military and commercial, that is Article 2 self-defense. But broader efforts to defend commercial ships of other nations, while it might be strategically a good idea, there's no constitutional authorization that would allow a president to do that unilateral. And second, taking offensive action. And striking targets within Yemen to degrade Yemeni capacity, Houthi capacity, while again it might be strategically a smart thing to do, that's not self-defense under Article 2. And so I basically view this at the first level as a set of actions that might have a strategic value, although we've yet to see a strategy.
Yep.
Senator Young and Senator Murphy and I wrote a letter to the administration asking many of these questions on January 23rd, and we don't have a response. But there may be a strategic wisdom in doing it, but I think the activities are far beyond what a president's unilateral power would be. That's number one. Number two, shared responsibility. Commercial shipping in the Red Sea involves ships from many, many nations. And although there are partners in this operation, the military actions are being undertaken by the United States and the UK. Why should the United States and UK be shouldering the burden of this? There needs to be, if we can get to a point where we can actually authorize U.S. participation, we shouldn't do it without other nations participating. But finally, I guess my most serious skepticism right now is at the effectiveness of this. President Biden himself has said that the actions that we are undertaking are not likely to deter Houthi escalation. And I am a little disappointed that you so quickly try to pull cold water on the idea that this is connected to the war in Gaza. These attacks started, Secretary Shapiro, as you said, on November 19. The Houthis have said this is because of the war in Gaza. Now, you've pointed out instances of ships that weren't going to Israel or instances of ships that had food that were going to nations that needed food. But I think the most natural interpretation of this is the Houthis seeing some suffer in the region or saying others are going to suffer in the region until we figure out a response. And I would venture to suggest that about the only time we've seen something that was a de-escalation moment was in the week-plus long pause in Gaza when the first hostage deal was done. And so trying to reestablish deterrence, I don't think you're going to do it if the 200 strikes become 400 strikes, 800 strikes, 1,200 strikes. I think you will reestablish deterrence when we get a hostage deal that leads us to a truce, that leads us to humanitarian aid into Gaza, that leads us to the ability to discuss whether whatever that truce period is can be extended. And so I hope you don't just pour cold water on the idea that, oh, this isn't really related to Gaza, because the timing of it was related to Gaza. They're saying it's related to Gaza, and the only period of de-escalation that we've seen was during the first hostage release. I'm going to continue to press on the legal authority questions, and I think many of us have these questions, and there's some difference of opinion, I think, on the committee about whether this U.S. strategy is going to involve de-escalation at all, or whether it's actually going to foment
more. I think he made his point there very well. So awesome job, Tim Kaine, because that, he calls the Houthi attacks abhorrent. I understand, we don't want any kind of escalation, but as he later lays out, they've made quite clear what their intentions are. It's because of the genocide in Gaza. That is why they are disrupting, as opposed to this amorphous, terroristic notion. One of the hallmarks really of racism is we are rational actors. They are savages. They don't have the ability to make choices on the world stage in the way that we do. They're just attacking ships during this assault on Gaza for no reason, apparently. And to the legality of it, he's absolutely right. The War Powers Resolution says that the president must come to Congress if he is engaging in an armed conflict and an act of war. He cannot do so without Congress, and that has been made clear both by the Constitution and by the War Powers Resolution. And even under the authorization for the use of military force that was passed to give Bush these broader powers to fight the war on terror, that is, I wish the AUMF were repealed, and it was not something that should have happened at the time. But even under that law, it's not because of the reasons that he lays out there, because they are commercial ships, because they're often strikes that are hitting targets in Yemen in response to attacks on ships that are not even our own. You can't even claim this is defensive because of terrorism towards the United States. I think it's threadbare even if they're attacking or blockading United States commercial ships. But as Tim Kaine lays out there, this is not even in response to our ships on many occasions. These are for ships for other countries or other purposes. So it's really just about attacking Yemen and the Houthis because they are disrupting the flow of commerce and capitalism. And that is not something that constitutes the defense of the United States under either the AUMF or the War Powers Resolution, which builds off of it in that way, or I would say cuts into it.
Gotta say, it's the first time I guess you can say that.
Don't sing
Tim Kaine has earned.
Don't sing it.
It's almost like he's in
Tim
the membrane.
Tim Kaine in the membrane.
Oh God, I knew
He's
you were
earned
gonna
it.
sing it. I mean, that was pretty decent though, and it's just
It was good. I mean, it's good to hear it from someone like him too. And I don't mean that like you said. I don't know if this is. I didn't know this about him, that he's been good on this issue, but I mean more generally, it's good to hear it from someone who's considered a sort of centrist Dem, like not some like progressive stalwart or something like that. And the idea that that the administration would just so brazenly lie about this, that even Tim Kaine would have to call them out on it, is I think noteworthy for sure.